Meanwhile, a federal hearing today for the man accused of killing 9 black parishioners at a South Carolina church last year. A judge will determine if Dylann Roof is mentally competent to stand trial. Roof's lawyers argue their client is not. Today's hearing will be closed to the media. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reid is in Washington with more. So, Paula, can you first explain why Roof is having a competency hearing in the first place?
For his lawyers, this is really their last chance to keep their client off death row. He is, of course, innocent until proven guilty by a jury of his peers. But as we know, Vlad, there's very little question here about his guilt or innocence in this case. In fact, he was willing to plead guilty. But the Department of Justice chose to pursue the death penalty. Therefore, he has to have a trial. So that's why everyone was shocked when the first day of trial, jurors were there to possibly be in panel to hear this case. And his lawyers came out and said they wanted a competency hearing.
So why is this closed to the media when it's been such a high-profile case?
That's a great question, and several media organizations have been fighting this for weeks now. But the judge's argument is that this hearing should be closed because any information that is reported or gets out publicly about these questions about his competency, in his mind, could potentially taint the jury pool and therefore ultimately taint the verdict in this case. So he has opted to keep it closed over the objections of the media and the victims' families.
And what are sources saying about whether this will be successful?
We're totally relying on our sources to tell us what is going on here because all of the filings by defense attorneys have been sealed. We don't know why they are arguing that he is not competent. We have no idea what the basis is there because the judge has sealed everything. But sources involved in the investigation have told us that the interviews of Dylann Roof were, quote, textbook, that there was nothing to indicate that there could potentially be a competency problem down the line. Of course, at the outset of this case, they knew that this could be a potential defense, so they were looking for that. And at this point, it's always a high bar to try to be found not competent, but we're told so far there's no indication that he should be successful here.
All right, so let's say he's found not competent to stand trial. What would happen next?
Well, there's 2 consequences, Vlad. The first is for him. He would continue to be detained, but he would not have a trial. They cannot release him because odds are that the judge would find that he poses too great a risk to the community. He would remain incarcerated, continue mental health treatment to try to remedy whatever sort of deficiency there is in his competency. But there are much bigger questions for what the effect would be on the criminal justice system. There are many people in this country who believe that the criminal justice system does not sufficiently defend people regardless of their race. And there are certain people that argue that it is too easy in this country to kill black citizens without any repercussion. So if someone like Dylann Roof, who is accused of a crime like this, is able to walk without even a trial, that would have huge implications for the trust that many people have in the justice system.
Yeah, and yet the ACLU and others have called for Roof to not get the death penalty. If he's found competent, can we expect him to plead guilty?
Well, he can't plead guilty because once the Department of Justice and federal prosecutors opt to pursue the death penalty, they have to find him guilty in a trial. They have to make that finding. So once the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, decided we're going to pursue the death penalty, that meant he couldn't plead guilty. They had to have 2 trials, just like we saw in the Boston Marathon bombing. First, a trial to determine whether or not you were guilty. If you're found guilty, then there's another trial to determine whether or not you will get the death penalty. The ACLU's argument is more of one against using the death penalty, saying this eye for an eye kind of justice, that this does not solve the inherent disparities in our justice system. It will not solve the racism that allegedly fueled this crime.
Paula Reid in Washington for us. Paula, thank you.